Devin Jeffries first saw LaToya Beggs at the Blue Note Bar exactly 1 year and 3 months ago. She was sitting at the bar, slowly stirring a pink cocktail with a straw. In the dim light of the lamps, her dark skin seemed almost velvety, and her short braids framed her face like a work of art. Devin remembered every detail of that night. The song playing from the speakers, something old, from the 90s, the smell of cheap whiskey and cigarette smoke, and the feeling as if the whole world had suddenly shrunk to the size of that bar. "Would you like some company?" he asked then, taking a seat on a nearby bar stool. LaToya looked up, big, expressive eyes, and smiled. There was no coquetry in that smile, only politeness. "I don't mind," she said, and her voice was soft, with a slight huskiness. "I'm LaToya. Devin Jeffries." So began a story that should have ended with a white dress and rings, not a wooden box in the woods. Now, standing in the drizzling rain with shovel in hand, Devin was trying to figure out how it had all gone wrong. In the light of Osric's flashlight, his best friend since childhood, the wooden box looked too small for a human body. Inside lay LaToya, with her eyes closed and blood caked on her temple. She was so beautiful even now. "Are you sure she's—" Osric Stokes didn't finish, but Devin understood. "Yes," he answered, though he didn't really check for a pulse. It was enough for him to see how lifelessly her body had collapsed after the blow. "Help me close the lid." Memories of how they'd met were replaced by images of their first date. A cheap restaurant on the outskirts of Pulaski that served the best waffles in all of Virginia. LaToya had laughed at his jokes, talked about her work at the clinic, how she'd always wanted to help people. Devin thought she was too good for someone like him, a guy with a warehouse past and a dim future. "Dig deeper," Osric interrupted him. "If anyone finds it—" "No one's gonna find it," Devin said, thrusting the shovel into the soft soil. "We're 3 miles from the nearest trail." The rain intensified, turning the ground to sticky mud. This was the most remote patch of woods they could find without traveling far from town, a place where he and Osric used to come hunting when they were still teenagers. 6 months ago, Devin had proposed to LaToya. It had happened at the same bar where they'd met. He'd gotten down on one knee, right on the floor, sticky with spilled beer, and handed her a ring with a tiny stone, all he could afford after 3 months of saving money. "I know I'm no prince on a white horse," he said then, "but I love you, LaToya Beggs, and I swear I always will." She cried when she said yes, and the bar patrons applauded. It was the happiest moment of his life, and then everything started to fall apart. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, like a landslide that couldn't be stopped. "I need money," he told Osric 2 weeks ago. "LaToya wants a real wedding, with a dress and everything, and I can barely even pay the rent." Osric, who worked at Eternal Rest Funeral Home, took a drag on his cigarette and exhaled the smoke into the ceiling of his tiny apartment. "I know a way," he said finally, "but you'll need to use LaToya's pass." The plan was simple. Osric knew people willing to pay good money for certain medications from the clinic where LaToya worked. All Devin had to do was temporarily borrow her pass and gain access to the drug warehouse. Devin was to pick up the drugs. Osric was to deliver them to the buyers. 50-50, almost $10,000 each. "She'll never find out," Osric assured her, "and you can give her the wedding of her dreams." The hole had gotten deep enough. Osric helped him lower a box, an old wooden box that used to hold tools in the back room of the funeral home. The box was sturdy, made of thick boards with hinges and a latch. Water had already begun to seep to the bottom where LaToya's body lay. "I'm sorry," Devin whispered, looking at her face one last time before closing the lid. "I didn't mean to." The first theft went perfectly. LaToya didn't suspect a thing when he accidentally took her pass along with his keys back home late that night. He simply put the card back in her bag while she showered. The money was enough for the down payment on the real diamond ring he'd given her for her birthday. "You're the best," she said then, beaming with happiness. "How could you afford this?" "I just want you to have the best," he replied, kissing her forehead. LaToya Beggs was not only beautiful, but smart. Too smart for her own good. She'd begun to notice oddities, expensive gifts he couldn't afford, his nervousness when she mentioned work, coming home late without explanation, And then her pass went missing, for the second time in a month. She'd followed him yesterday. Devon hadn't noticed her when he'd met Osric in the alley behind the bar. Didn't see her standing in the shadows watching him hand over a small box of pills. Didn't hear her quietly aghast when she recognized the clinic's logo on the packages. When he got home, she was waiting for him. She was sitting in the kitchen of their small rented apartment with her hands folded on the table. Next to her was a printout from the clinic's accounting system, a list of missing medications with dates that matched the exact days her pass had disappeared. "I know everything, Devon," she said quietly. "You used me. You stole drugs from the clinic with my pass." "Latoya, listen," he tried to explain, making excuses as he went along. "I was doing it for us, for our future." "For us?" Her voice shook. "You framed me for a felony. I could get fired, Devon. I could go to jail. And all for what? For showboat money? I wanted you to be proud of me." He felt the anger building inside him. "So you wouldn't be ashamed of your fiancé in front of your sister and friends. I was never ashamed of you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I loved you as you are. But now I see that I didn't know you at all." She stood up and walked toward the door. Devon grabbed her arm. "Where are you going?" "To Chanel's. I need to think. And tomorrow I'm going to the police." "No." He squeezed her wrist tighter. "You're not going anywhere. Let me go, Devon. You're hurting me." What happened next? He remembered vaguely. Latoya's scream, her attempt to break free. He remembered only his rage blind, all-consuming, and then the sound, the sickening crunch as her head hit the edge of the kitchen table, and the silence. A terrible, deafening silence. Devon threw the last shovelful of earth on the grave and leveled the surface. He and Osric scattered fallen leaves and branches around, camouflaging the fresh mound. "No one will ever know," Osric said, wiping his dirty hands on his jeans. "It all looks like she just walked away, dumped you." "She wanted to go to the police," Devon muttered, looking down at his earth-stained boots. "To tell them everything." "Well, she won't tell anyone now." Osric patted him on the shoulder. "Let's get out of here. The rain will wash away all traces by morning." They walked away, leaving behind only the crumpled grass that would soon straighten, a grave that no one will find, and a box that became a coffin for the woman who once loved him. Chanel Beggs tapped her foot nervously on the floor in the reception area of the Pulaski police station. Missing persons posters and wanted posters hung on the wall across the hall. Her sister Latoya hadn't answered her cell phone in almost 24 hours, and her boyfriend, that creep Devon, claimed she'd just left after an argument. Minus Ms. Beggs? A tall man with a tired face and a streak of gray in his short-cropped hair appeared in front of her. "I'm Detective Caden McCrae. Come into my office." The office was a small room with a single window overlooking the parking lot. Files piled on the desk and evidence photos and a map of the city hung on the wall. "Tell me again about your sister," McCrae asked, pulling out a notebook. "When was the last time you saw her?" "The day before yesterday," Chanel answered, clutching her cell phone. "We had lunch together at Mabel's. She seemed worried, said she was having problems at work, but didn't say what they were." "What about her fiancé? What's his name?" "Devon Jeffries." Chanel couldn't hide the disgust in her voice. "I never understood what she saw in him. He works in a warehouse, always broke, but for some reason he's been giving her expensive gifts lately." McCrae raised an eyebrow. "Expensive gifts? Like what?" "A diamond ring, a new cell phone." Chanel shook her head. "Where did he get that kind of money? I'm sure he's involved in something illegal." And Latoya was starting to suspect something too. The detective made a note in his notebook. "You don't think she could have just gone away for a few days to think about it? After the fight with her fiancé?" "No," Chanel answered firmly. "Latoya would never leave without telling me. We're very close. And another thing..." She pulled her cell phone out of her bag and showed the detective a text message. "She texted me this yesterday morning. The last message." McCrae took the phone and read, "Chanel, I found out something terrible about Devon. We need to talk. Coming to see you tonight." "She never showed up," Chanel added quietly. "I called her all evening. And when I went to their house, Devon said they'd had a fight and she'd left with only her purse." McCrae looked at the girl carefully. You think he did something to her? I'm sure he did. Chanel looked him straight in the eye. Please find my sister. When Chanel left, McCrae sat for a long time looking out the window at the gray sky and drizzling rain. In 20 years on the force, he'd seen enough to know that when a young woman disappears after a fight with her partner, it rarely ends well, especially if the partner suddenly had unexplained money. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of the clinic where LaToya Beggs worked. Detective Caden McCrae believed in thoroughness, and in the fact that the truth was always out there, you just had to know where to look. Consciousness returned to LaToya in waves. First came the pain, throbbing, sharp, centered in his left temple. Then the smells, damp earth, wood, his own sweat. And finally, the realization of the cramped space. She was lying in some kind of box, barely able to move. Her first thought was, I'm dead. The second, no, the dead don't feel pain. LaToya tried to move her fingers. It worked. Then her arms, then her legs. Her body obeyed, albeit reluctantly. She felt the space around her. Wooden walls, rough to the touch. A lid just above her face, barely leaving room to breathe. I've been buried. The thought came with deafening clarity, bringing with it a wave of panic. LaToya screamed, but the sound came out pathetic, squashed. No one would hear her here, no matter where that here was. She forced herself to breathe more slowly. As a nurse, she knew if you panic, you'll run out of oxygen faster. One must stay calm and think. The box was dark, but not completely. There were thin rays of light through the gaps between the boards, so it was daytime outside, and those same gaps let in air, otherwise she would have suffocated by now. LaToya pushed on the lid. It wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, but to no avail. Something heavy was holding the lid. Earth, she realized. Devin buried me. Memories of the fight came back instantly, his face contorted with anger, his hands clutching her wrists, her head hitting the edge of the table. Then the darkness. Devin, her fiancé, the man she loved, the man who'd decided to kill her when she'd learned of his crimes. Rage, unexpectedly strong, supplanted fear. LaToya pressed down on the lid again, now with both hands, directing all the force into one point. The wood gave slightly. She felt the earth crumble. Again and again, she pressed the lid until she heard a cracking sound. One of the boards had cracked. Earth sprinkled through the crack, but LaToya didn't stop. She kept pushing until the crack widened enough to allow her hand to slip through. The earth was wet and loose. LaToya began to rake it, widening the hole. Her hands scratched the boards and stones. Her nails broke, but she didn't notice the pain. Her whole being was focused on her one goal, to get out. It must have been hours before she was able to free her upper body. Her eyes, weaned from the light, were watery. The forest was all around. Raw, unfriendly, but it represented freedom. With difficulty, LaToya climbed out of her grave and collapsed to the ground beside her. Her lungs greedily gulped in fresh air. She was alive. She had made it out. But what next? Her first instinct was to run. To the police. To her sister. Anywhere. Just to get away from here. But then a more sobering thought came to mind. Devin thought she was dead. That gave her an advantage. If she went to the police now, she'd only have her word against his. The bruises and abrasions could have come from a multitude of circumstances. Devin could say they had an argument. She left. And what happened next? He doesn't know. No, she needs proof. Real, hard evidence. She needs to find out who else Devin was working with. Uncover the whole scheme to steal the drugs. Only then can she get justice. LaToya rose to her trembling feet. Her head was spinning, but she steadied herself. She looked around. The forest was unfamiliar, but there was a gap in the distance, perhaps a road. She moved toward it, stumbling and grabbing trees for support. Once on the road, she realized where she was. It was an old forest road north of Pulaski. About 3 miles from here lived Talisha Drake, her friend from her high school days. Someone she could trust, and who wasn't connected to Devin. LaToya moved on her way, keeping to the side of the road. She knew she looked terrible, dirty, in torn clothes, with dried blood on her face. But that was even better now. No one would want to go near someone like that, which meant no one would recognize her. Devin Jeffries sat on the couch in the living room, absent-mindedly changing channels on the TV. There was an unfinished bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, the third in 2 days. The ringing of the doorbell made him wince. He glanced at his watch. It was almost 8 o'clock in the evening. Who could it be? Opening the door, he saw 2 people. Detective McCrae, to whom he had already answered questions about LaToya's disappearance, and an unfamiliar young officer. "Good evening, Mr. Jeffries," McCrae said. "May we come in? We have a few additional questions." Devin stepped aside to let the police officers into the apartment. His heart was racing, but he tried to look calm. "Did you find anything?" he asked, feigning concern. "Not yet," McCrae said, looking around the room. "But we checked the security tapes at the bus station and the airport. Your fiancée wasn't there. Maybe she left with someone in a car?" Devin suggested, sitting back down on the couch. "Maybe." McCrae remained standing. "Minus Mr. Jeffries, you said you had a fight the night LaToya disappeared. About what exactly?" Devin had the story ready to go. "She accused me of cheating on her. Said she saw me with some woman. That's not true, of course. I tried to explain, but she was furious. Said she was going to her sister's, packed a bag, and left." "What time was that?" "Around 9 p.m. "And you didn't go after her?" "No," Devin shook his head. "I figured she needed time to cool off. I called her in the morning, but she didn't answer. Then I called Chanel, but she said she hadn't seen LaToya." McCrae nodded, pretending to write something down in his notebook. In reality, he was watching Devin closely. The way he avoided a direct gaze, the way his hands trembled slightly, the way he licked his lips. "Minus Mr. Jeffries," the detective said slowly. "Did you know that the clinic where LaToya works had recently discovered some medications missing?" Devin froze for a moment, then shrugged. "No, she didn't tell me about it." "That's odd." McCrae pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. "Because we have security footage of you entering the clinic 2 weeks ago, using LaToya's pass." The blood drained from Devin's face. He didn't know about the cameras. No one warned him about the cameras. "Yeah, just dropping her off at work," he mumbled. "No big deal. On the tape, you go in at 2 in the morning, McCrae squinted, "and come out 15 minutes later with a package. LaToya was home at that time, and we checked her phone records." Devin felt a cold sweat running down his back. He had to think of something right away. "Okay," he admitted, deciding to go for the partial truth. "I took her pass, but only to get some medication for myself. I get migraines, bad ones, and there's no insurance, you know?" McCrae looked at him with a long, appraising stare. "Minus Mr. Jeffries," he said finally. "I'm not going to charge you with theft right now, but I suggest you get a good lawyer. And if you know anything about LaToya Begg's whereabouts that you haven't told us, now would be a good time to do it." Devin shook his head. "I've said everything I know. I love LaToya. I just want her back." When the cops left, Devin poured himself a whiskey with trembling hands. They suspect something, but they have no proof. They don't. The body is safely hidden, and no one will ever find it. He should have called Osric, warn him. They should stick to the same story. LaToya reached Talisha Drake's house late that night. Every step was difficult, her head ached, and her mouth was dry with thirst. But she made it. Talisha lived on the outskirts of Radford, a small town 20 miles from Pulaski. They'd been friends in high school, then Talisha had left to go to school, but she'd returned 2 years ago after her divorce. Now she worked as a hairdresser and lived alone in the small house her grandmother had left her. Seeing LaToya on the doorstep, Talisha first recoiled in surprise. Then she recognized her friend beneath the layer of dirt and blood. "Jesus, LaToya, what's wrong? Can I come in?" LaToya wheezed. "And please don't tell anyone I'm here." Talisha quickly dragged her inside and closed the door. She helped her to the bathroom, where LaToya was finally able to wash her face and see her reflection. The abrasion on her temple looked frightening, but thankfully the bleeding had long since stopped. A bruise was filling up under her eye and her lip was smashed. After a shower, clean clothes, and hot tea and sandwiches, LaToya told Talisha everything about the medicine thefts, how she'd caught Devin, his attack, and how she'd woken up in a box underground. "You have to go to the police," Talisha said when LaToya finished her story. That psycho tried to kill you. I'll go. LaToya nodded. But not right now. I need proof first. What kind of proof? Look at you. Bruises and abrasions could be from anything. LaToya shook her head. Devin will say I fell or that we fought and I left on my own, and then decided to set him up. It'll be my word against his. What about the box in the woods? Your grave? I'm not sure I can find that place again, LaToya admitted. Besides, who knows, maybe they've already come back and covered all traces. They? Talisha questioned. Devin couldn't have done it alone. He had someone helping him. Osric, most likely. That creepy guy from the funeral home? Talisha shuddered. He always struck me as odd. They worked together, LaToya said, leaning back in her chair. And maybe they weren't the only ones. I need to know the whole pattern. Gather evidence not just against Devin, but against everyone else. And how are you going to do that? LaToya thought for a moment. I need my cell phone, she finally said. It has contacts, pictures, messages from Devin, but it's probably at my house. You're not going back there, are you? Talisha grimaced. No, of course not. LaToya shook her head. But I know someone who can help. Detective McCrae sat at his desk, looking over the missing persons reports for the past year. Something was bugging him about Devin Jeffries' story. Too many inconsistencies, too many obvious lies. Surveillance video from the clinic clearly showed Devin going in there at night with LaToya's pass. And this was clearly not an isolated incident. Access control records showed that someone had used LaToya's pass 5 times in the last month after hours, and each time it coincided with the missing meds. But that was just the theft, and McCrae suspected something far more sinister. The door to the office opened, and Chanel Beggs walked in. Her eyes were red from crying, but she stood straight and resolute. Detective, I found something, she said, handing him a plastic bag. It's LaToya's cell phone. It was hidden under the mattress in her apartment. McCrae took the bag carefully. Did you break into Mr. Jeffries' apartment? I have a key, Chanel explained. LaToya gave me a spare in case she lost hers. I went there when Devin wasn't home. McCrae frowned. Technically, that could be considered trespassing, but at the moment, he was more interested in the phone. Why do you think it's important? Because Devin said LaToya took her purse with her when she left, and her phone is always in her purse, Chanel explained. If her phone was left behind, so was her purse. And if she was going to leave, she would never leave her ID and money behind. The logic was impeccable. McCrae turned on the phone. Fortunately, it wasn't password protected. Is there anything else you want to show me? He asked, looking through the latest messages. Chanel pulled a small baggie out of her bag. I found this in Devin's jacket pocket when I was looking through the closet, she said. Looks like pills. The same ones that went missing from the clinic. McCrae took the bag carefully. Inside were indeed pills with the logo of a pharmaceutical company. He wasn't an expert, but these looked like serious prescription drugs. Minus Ms. Beggs, he said seriously. You do realize that these items may not be admissible as evidence because they were obtained in an unconventional manner. I don't care, Chanel replied. I just want to find my sister. I know Devin did something terrible to her. Please help me. McCrae stared at the young woman in front of him. Her determination and desperation were almost palpable. He sighed. I'll do my best, he promised. Now tell me again when you last spoke to your sister. Talisha Drake looked at LaToya with concern. Her friend was sitting at the kitchen table making notes on a piece of paper. A cup of long-cooled tea stood nearby. You need to rest, Talisha said. You've been through a terrible shock. You need to recover. I'll rest when Devin and everyone who helped him is behind bars, LaToya replied without looking up. I have 7 days. 7 days? Why 7 days? Because I want him to suffer. I want him to think he's rid of me so he can relax. And then I'll be back. LaToya raised her eyes, and Talisha flinched when she saw the cold determination in them. Like a ghost from the past. And this time I'll have all the proof I need. Talisha shook her head. It's dangerous, LaToya. He might try to kill you again. He won't, LaToya said confidently. Because this time I'll be ready, and I won't be alone. She looked at the list she'd made. Names, dates, places, everything she remembered about the scheme to steal the drugs. She needed to check every item, gather evidence, make sure everyone involved was punished, and then go back and face the man who tried to kill her, the man she had once loved. Outside the window, a new day was beginning. The first of the 7 days LaToya had given herself to prepare. 7 days may seem like a short time, but for LaToya Beggs, it stretched into an eternity. Every hour was filled with planning, searching for evidence, and preparing for her return. With beating marks on her face and constant headaches from her concussion, she couldn't appear in public, so Talisha became her eyes and ears in the outside world. Through old connections at the clinic, LaToya accessed the records of the missing medications, a complete list with dates and names. Through social media, she and Talisha tracked strange coincidences. Each time after the expensive medications went missing, Osric Stokes posted photos from expensive restaurants or with new purchases. On the 5th day, Chanel, unaware that her sister was alive, accidentally provided the most important piece of evidence. She sent Detective McCrae an audio recording of a phone conversation between Devon and Osric, which she had managed to make when she had secretly broken into Devon's apartment. "They won't find anything," Devon said on the tape. "The body's safely hidden. No one's linking us to that place." "What about the detective?" Osric asked. "He has no proof, just suspicion. Look, it'll blow over in a couple days. We'll continue to work with our clients, but we'll be careful. No trace." Talisha handed the tape to LaToya. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the voice of the man who had tried to kill her, and now planned to get away with it. "Now we have everything," LaToya finally said. "All that's left is to get him to confess in person." "It's too dangerous," Talisha shook her head. "Why not just give the tape to the police?" "Because I want to see his face," LaToya said firmly. "I want him to know that he couldn't kill me, that I'm stronger than he thought." The plan matured by the end of the 6th day. They spent the 7th on final preparations. Talisha cut LaToya's hair and dyed it black, for disguise while they made their way to Pulaska. Chanel was to discreetly lead Detective McCrae to Devon's house at the appointed time without explaining anything in advance, and so it was the evening of the 7th day after the attempted murder. At the exact hour that Devon and Osric had buried the wooden box containing her body a week earlier, LaToya Beggs stood at the door of the apartment she'd once shared with the man who'd promised to love her for the rest of her life. From behind the door came music and laughter. Judging by the cars in the parking lot, there were at least 6 people inside. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. LaToya took a deep breath, calming her frantically pounding heart. A different LaToya stood before her, not the naive nurse who'd allowed herself to be tricked, but a woman who'd been through death and returned for justice. She pressed the bell. The door was opened by Devon himself. He held a bottle of beer in one hand and a cell phone in the other. For a moment, his face froze in the polite smile prepared for an unexpected guest. Then the smile slowly slid away, giving way to disbelief and horror. The bottle slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Hi, honey," LaToya said, looking him straight in the eye. "Did you miss me?" She stepped forward, and Devon stepped back, letting her pass. His face was dead pale, his mouth open, but no sound came out of it. In the parlor, the music died down. All heads turned toward the entrance, where LaToya stood alive, breathing, with short black hair and a cold stare. She caught a glimpse of familiar faces, the 2 guys from the warehouse where Devon worked, their girlfriends, and Osric, frozen with his glass in his hand, as if turned to stone. "Did you see a ghost?" she asked, looking around the room. "Or maybe someone who should be dead?" "That's impossible!" Devon finally wheezed. "You can't be here! You're dead! We buried you!" The silence in the room became absolute. Devon's friends looked around in confusion. One of the girls rose slowly from the couch, grabbed her purse, and slipped out the door without a word. She was followed by the other. "Bad joke, buddy." One of the guys grinned nervously, heading for the exit. "We should probably go." Soon it was just LaToya, Devon, and Osric. "You can't be alive," Devon repeated, his eyes widening with fear. "We buried you. You couldn't have gotten out of that box." "I couldn't, but I did," LaToya replied, taking a step toward him. "The lid wasn't as strong as you thought, and the ground wasn't as heavy." "We must finish what we started," Osric said suddenly, rising from the couch. His face contorted with rage and fear. "She'll tell the police everything. We'll go to jail." LaToya felt a chill run down her spine, but she showed no fear. Instead, she pulled her cell phone out of her pocket and pressed the record button. Tell you what exactly, Osric? About how you stole medication from the clinic? Or how Devin hit me, and then you buried me alive together, thinking I was dead? Shut up. Devin stepped forward, his hands balled into fists. You weren't supposed to survive. It'll ruin everything. Ruin? What exactly, Devin? LaToya asked, continuing to take notes. Your little business selling stolen drugs? Or your alibi for my disappearance? Everything, he exploded. You think it's just stealing medicine? We were making thousands. We've got connections, clients, the whole scheme's worked out. And now you come in here and ruin everything. Why did you try to kill me, Devin? LaToya asked me directly. Because I found out about the thefts? Because you were going to go to the police, he shouted. You would have ruined everything I'd accomplished. I didn't mean for this to happen, but you left me no choice. Osric suddenly rushed to the door, but it swung open before he could reach it. Standing on the threshold was Detective McCrae with a gun in his hand. Behind him, Chanel's face was visible, her eyes wide at the sight of her living sister. Devin Jeffries, Osric Stokes, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder and theft, McCrae said in an official tone. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Osric collapsed to his knees, covering his face with his hands. Devin, on the other hand, was petrified, keeping his eyes on LaToya. How? He whispered. How did you survive underground? I woke up almost as soon as you left, LaToya answered, looking him straight in the eye. The box was old, with cracks in it. It had enough air in it, and the lid cracked when I pushed on it. The rest was a matter of time and patience. A second policeman, who entered after McCrae, cuffed first Osric, then Devin. They were led out of the apartment to the shocked stares of the neighbors in the hallway. Chanel rushed to her sister, hugging her so tightly it was hard to breathe. I thought you were dead, she sobbed. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me you were alive? I needed time, LaToya replied softly, stroking her sister's back. Time to gather evidence, to make them pay for what they did. Detective McCrae returned to the apartment as his partner drove the arrestees away. Minus Ms. Beggs, he said, turning to LaToya, you're going to have to give a formal statement and submit to a medical examination. Of course, she nodded. I have a recording of their confession and proof of the whole scheme to steal the drugs. McCrae looked at her carefully. Why didn't you go to the police right after you got out? Because I needed hard evidence, LaToya answered. I knew Devin would have denied it, that it would be my word against his. I needed him to come clean. It was dangerous, the detective pointed out. He could have tried to kill you again. I was ready, LaToya said firmly. And this time I wasn't alone. The next few hours passed like a blur. A trip to the police station, a detailed statement, a medical exam that confirmed the bruises and concussion. Chanel never left her sister's side, as if afraid LaToya might disappear again. By morning, it was all over. Devin and Osric were in custody, charged with attempted murder and grand larceny. The investigation was just beginning, but it was already clear that they were facing long sentences. LaToya sat in McCrae's office, holding a cup of hot coffee. Fatigue came over her as soon as the adrenaline wore off, but with it came a strange sense of peace. Justice had been served. She survived and got the truth. We checked the place in the woods you described, McCrae said, looking through some papers. We found a wooden box and signs of excavation. That's important evidence. What about the medication scheme? LaToya asked. There were other people involved, not just Devin and Osric. We're working on it, the detective nodded. With your testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we have a good basis for a full-scale investigation. There will probably be other arrests. Chanel, sitting next to her sister, squeezed her hand. What now, LaToya? Are you going back to the clinic? LaToya thought for a moment. The last week had changed her forever. She couldn't just go back to her old life as if nothing had happened. I don't know, she answered honestly. First, I need to heal the wounds, both physical and mental, and then I'll decide. You should see a psychologist, McCrae said. What you've been through, that's a lot of trauma. I know, LaToya nodded. And I will. But right now, I just want to go home with my sister. They left the police station at dawn. The sun was just beginning to rise, coloring the Pulaski sky a soft pink. Latoya took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. It had never seemed so sweet to her. "You can stay at my place," Chanel offered as they walked to her car, "as long as you want." "Thank you," Latoya smiled. "I'd like that." 2 weeks after Devin and Osric's arrest, the Pulaski police conducted a major operation to apprehend all those involved in the drug theft scheme. 4 more people were arrested, including a clinic security guard and a pharmacist who had access to the warehouse. The scheme was much larger than originally thought. The stolen drugs were sold not only in Virginia, but also in neighboring states. Latoya testified at the preliminary hearing, looking straight into Devin's eyes across the courtroom. He looked gaunt, aged, lost, but she felt neither hatred nor pity for him, only relief that justice had been served. After the hearing, she met up with Talisha, who had come to support her friend. "How are you?" Talisha asked, hugging her. "Better," Latoya replied. "Better every day." It was true. The nightmares still came at night. The darkness, the cramped box, the feeling of the ground above her head. But they didn't seem so real anymore. And in sessions with a psychologist, she was learning to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, to accept her feelings without letting them take over. "You know," Latoya said as she and Talisha sat in a small cafe near the courthouse, "I'm thinking of moving, maybe to Richmond or even farther away. Start over." "That's a good idea." Talisha nodded. "A new place, new people, new opportunities, and a new me," Latoya added. "Because I'm not the same girl who fell in love with Devin Jeffries anymore, that Latoya died in that box in the woods." "And who are you now?" Talisha asked with a slight smile. Latoya looked out the window, out onto the street where people were hurrying about their business, unaware of what she was going through, how close she had been to real death, and how much she had changed, coming back from the other side. "I am a survivor," she finally answered, "and I will never let anyone take my life or my freedom from me again." Her sister supported her decision to move, even though she was sad about the upcoming separation. Chanel helped her pack, look for an apartment in Richmond, and plan her new life. "You can always come back," she said as she put Latoya's clothes in boxes, "if something goes wrong." "I know," Latoya smiled, "but I need to do this, need to move on." Pulaski had become a city of ghosts for her, not just the ghost of the girl she'd once been, but the ghosts of unfulfilled hopes, of broken illusions, of betrayal. Here at every corner lurked memories she wanted to leave behind. The day Latoya was leaving, Detective McCrae came to say goodbye. He looked tired but satisfied. The investigation was progressing well, all the evidence had been collected, and the prosecution was ready to present the case in court. "You're a strong woman, Ms. Beggs," he said, shaking her hand. "Not everyone could have gone through what you've been through and still be so whole." "I don't feel particularly whole," Latoya admitted, "but I'm working on it." "If you ever need anything," McCrae handed her a business card, "give me a call, anytime." Latoya nodded, genuinely touched by his concern. "Thank you for everything." Looking back, she realized how many people had helped her out of this nightmare. Talisha, who had sheltered her when she was most vulnerable. Chanel, who had never stopped searching for the truth. Detective McCrae, who had believed her and brought her case to a conclusion. And, in a way, even herself, the part of her soul that refused to give up even in her darkest hour. As she boarded the bus to Richmond, Latoya took one last look at Pulaski through the window. The city where she had almost died. The city she was leaving to truly start living.